Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. I've been getting a lot of requests to do a little tutorial for my outfit that I made. So I'm just gonna jump right into it and let you guys know how I made it. So first, I'm starting out with some cutouts that I did for the top and the bottoms for the bikini. That is the bottom piece, as you can see, and this is the top piece. Now all you're going to want to do is pick whatever fabric you're going to use to make your bikini and trace your stencils right onto the fabric. So after you trace them, you should end up with one piece, well actually two pieces, for the top of the bikini and the one piece for the bottom. So you should have three pieces total. So here, I'm just getting ready to basically fold over and pin down where I'm going to sew the sides of my fabric down. Basically, whenever you sew something, you want to fold in the seams. No, that's not a good description. You want to fold in the raw edge so that when you sew it down, it's a clean edge. So that's all I'm basically doing right here, is folding down the outside of my fabric so that when I sew it, I get that clean look once it's all finished. Some people use push pins, I think they're called, to hold the fabric in place, but I've learned that using the bobby pins works way better for me. But you can use whatever you feel like, really. So here, as you can see, I have my fabric. I have locked it down, and I'm getting ready to sew using a zigzag stitch. And you want to keep the zigzag stitch centered, going all the way down. Whenever you get ready to sew, especially if you're using a machine, you want to make sure that you drop down your needle into your fabric first before you start sewing. So you see, as I'm sewing, I'm taking the bobby pins out, and I'm making sure that as I'm sewing, I'm keeping the stitches in the center of this strip of fabric that I'm sewing on, and then taking the bobby pins out as I move along. I was trying to get the best angle that I could. I was literally recording with one hand and sewing with the other. So I was trying to show you guys exactly how everything should be positioned once you're sewing everything down. So once you get your first stitch in, let me just adjust this lighting so you can see. So once you get your first stitch in, as you can see, it's going all the way down. And that is how it's going to end up looking on the edge. The stitch just goes straight down. So I pinned the other side down off camera. And all I'm getting ready to do is just sew the other side down, just like I did on the other side. So once you sew down your other side, this is how your fabric should look. And this is pretty much the base for how your bikini top is gonna look once you get your two sides sewed down. For the last part, what I'm gonna end up doing is folding this part of the fabric up and this part of the fabric over and sewing it just above the edge. Putting the bobby pin in place to hold things down once I sew it. But you're sewing it just along the edge, because what's going to happen is you're going to need a space for your string or your elastic or whatever you plan to use as your ties for your bikini top. That's where you're going to feed your strings through. It's through that space that you created with the fabric on the end.
Why am I so obsessed with The Sims? I don't even know.
Just bear with me because, again, I'm trying to show you guys how it should be sewed with one hand and record with the other. Okay, so I ended up sewing it off camera, but as you can see, I sewed it going right down the center of my fabric. Now those little pieces of fabric that are showing through, you can just cut those right off. So all I did in that little clip that you just watched was I sewed going across just above the edge of the fabric where I folded it over, just so that I'd have the space to put my elastic band through or whatever string I plan on using to tie my bikini top. Now right here, I'm just going in with my bobby pins to get ready to sew my bottoms. And it's pretty much the same concept when you do your bottoms. You just pin down on the edge, just as I'm doing, and then you sew right down the center of that fabric that you folded over. And another thing you want to make sure is that when you do go to sew your fabric, you want to make sure that you sew it on the opposite side of what's going to be showing. You can't tell by the video, but I'm sewing it on the side that's going to face on, how can I explain it? Basically the opposite side of your fabric. So say this was a black piece of fabric, but the inside of it was white. If you want the black part of the fabric to show, you're going to have to sew it on the white side. It's hard to tell because this fabric, both sides look pretty identical. So see, I sewed straight down. This is the opposite part of my fabric that I sewed down on. Straight down. And this is the part of my fabric that's going to be showing. That's the front. So all I'm doing right now is just going back in to pin it down and sew it. So after you sew both sides down, this is what you should be left with. 2 zigzag stitch going right down the center of the fabric with your tabs. And just like you did with the bikini top, you're going to want to fold your sides in so that you'll have space for your ties to go into. So I sewed down the tabs for my bikini bottom off camera, and just as you did the top, you sew it right down the center of your tab, and you sew down the center on the other side as well. Now when you feel comfortable, you can, all those little threads that are poking out, what I typically do is I just do a single knot with it and then snip it, just for extra security, because I don't want these to come undone. I don't know if anybody else does that, but that's just what I choose to do. Yeah, and this is a finished bottom that I did last night, and it's a tad bit bigger, but this is what you should be left with after all your sewing is done and your elastic string has been put through. Now here I'm just showing you what your top should look like, your left and your right top of your bikini, before you put your elastic through, and what your bottom should be look like once you've sewed everything down. This is what it should look like. Now unfortunately, I left the elastic at home that I was going to use for my bikini top, so I have to find a store that carries the specific one that I was using. But if you guys want me to show you how exactly you put your elastic string through and the kind that you get and the measurements and everything like that, just leave a comment down in the description. But Okay, so to end off my video, like I was saying on the on my little voiceover that I was doing, if you guys want me to make a separate video for how exactly you insert your elastic string or whatever you want to use to tie your bikinis up, I suggest you use the elastic because it's stretchy. So, you know, if you have wide hips, if you have small hips, you know, any shape you are, like, the elastic is going to be able to fit very well. So if you need measurements and how to insert it, all of that, leave a comment or send me a message on Instagram and I will make another video on how I do that. It's fairly simple, but if you guys want me to show you that, I can do that. It's no problem. But like I was saying, once you are done, you should end up with your two pieces with the space in the middle. So you'll be able to insert your string in when the time comes for you to do that. And all of this excess on the side right here, this excess fabric, is just gonna get cut off. That's all that gets done with that. It's very simple. But I hope this video was helpful for you guys that have been asking me how I do it. I hope to bring some more videos very soon. Again, I am sorry that I left my freaking elastic home that I needed to do these with. Like, this is all the elastic that I have left to do these until I get more. And this literally, I can't do anything with this. So, you know, send me a message, like, comment, and subscribe, do whatever you want to do, and stay tuned for another video. I have plenty of fabric that I want to do these bikinis with, some velvet ones, some pink ones, just different stuff, different looks. So I might do videos on those too. But let me know what you guys think about this, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.
Cringy.
Okay, last thing. I forgot to mention this. Yeah, so once you're done, you should have your two pieces for your top, and then your one piece that'll be for your bottom. And what's another thing? If you do not have a sewing machine, I highly suggest that you get one. I'll put the details in the description box for the one that I have. It's fairly simple to use, but if you do not have a sewing machine, can this be done by hand? The answer is yes, it can. Is it gonna be fun? No, it's not. Is it gonna take twice as long? Probably. But if you don't have a machine, you could honestly do it by hand. It's just gonna take a really long time. And yeah. But if you're not entirely comfortable with using your sewing machine, whatever you might have, I suggest you do some research on YouTube on you know, how to use your sewing machine, how to thread it, the different settings, like just search up all those different kinds of things if you have a sewing machine. And if you're not comfortable sewing it, I suggest if you have scrap fabric laying around, I highly suggest that you use like little stuff like this. Test it out on your sewing machine using like different patterns and stuff and see how you do with that, just so you can get comfortable with doing different things. And once you're comfortable enough, try to make it and see how it goes. Let me know how it turns out for you. This is a fairly simple bikini to make, just because you're really only using 3 different pieces of fabric, not like multiple layers. Like if you're making pants or shirts or something like that, you might need to do that for that, but since you're making a bikini, you don't need all that. And the stitching, for the most part, is fairly simple. It really is. It's just a standard zigzag stitch. If you don't want to use a zigzag stitch, you could use a straight stitch maybe, but I really think that using a zigzag stitch works way better. What else do I have to add? Is that it? Oh, these stencils. If y'all don't feel like making your own stencils, send me a message and I'll just measure these out and send them to you, the measurements to you. I'm not gonna charge you guys because I don't think that it makes sense to do that. But yeah, if you guys need the measurements for your top and your bottom, just send me a message. These will fit pretty much any boob size, unless you have like huge nipples. This size will pretty much cover every titty size, no matter what. Unless your nipple is bigger than this. If your nipple is bigger than this, then you might have some trouble. But if it's not, this standard size will fit you just fine. So I hope I covered any possible questions that you guys might have. Again, if I forgot anything, if you guys have any questions, feel free to send me a message. Okay, that's it for the video. Nothing else. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Brianna? Okay. I know you're probably sick of me coming back on here, but I forgot a really important, oh, my nose. I forgot a really important, crucial part about sewing these bikinis. I mean, this is for sewing anything in general, but when you do these, when you make your template, right? Whatever bikini you plan on using, if you're making your own template and you're not using the one that I'm using, you have to make sure that when you trace it onto whatever material you're going to be using to trace off of, you really have to make sure that you leave yourself seam allowance. Let me adjust this. You really have to make sure that you leave yourself seam allowance. And what that is this space around your fabric, so that when you fold your edges over to sew them down, once you fold your edges over, all of them, they'll give you the size of your bikini. And how I typically figure out how much seam allowance to use is I typically picture my middle finger, and 99.9% of the times it's just the right amount for what for how much I need, really. And if you don't use the right amount of seam allowance, what's gonna happen is your bikini is either gonna be too small or it's gonna be too big. And in this case, here's an example. When I made this bikini bottom last night, I realized that when I had first when I first went to start my cutout, I realized that when I went and put the fabric underneath my template and I went to cut it, I added seam allowance not realizing that this already had it included. So, oh wait, this is the complete wrong piece. I added extra seam allowance to this, which wasn't needed because I already included it in my initial cutout that I did. So what happened was when I finished sewing this up and everything, it was a little bigger than what my initial bikini was. Like, look at this in comparison to this. It's not a big deal because it'll still look cute, but like, that's just showing you like what could go wrong if, well, not wrong so much, but what could happen if you don't measure your seam allowance correct. So, like, see, I was using my bikini top earlier, but for my bikini bottom, you see, there's pretty much, it's pretty much a finger space worth of seam allowance around my bikini. And the same thing for the top. It's pretty much middle finger worth of seam allowance. Now you could probably be safe with using, I want to say, 1/2 inch. That would probably be enough. But I don't know where my measuring tape went. Yeah, anyway, just make sure that you guys don't forget that, like, make sure you have your seam allowance measured correctly when you get ready to sew, because it's not going to be accurate once you sew everything down. You could probably get away with using maybe, I want to say half, maybe a little less than 1/2 inch. Whatever the width of your middle finger is, that's just what I use. You guys can look up the preferred amount of seam allowance, but I just use my middle finger as a guide. And like I said, it works out for me. But that's all that I wanted to add. That's it. And I swear this is the last video. I'm not adding in anything else. That's it.